Dr. Jeff Armstrong served both Muscatine Community College and Eastern Iowa Community Colleges during his over 30-year career, which began as a part-time community programming assistant in 1982. He held many roles with increasing responsibility.
When Jeff first came, we were trying to find a good fit for what would work for him. And so we had Jeff work with cosmetology. They had a couple of models that were supposed to show up, and they didn't show. One of them was for a haircut, and the other one was for a permanent. So I said, Jeff, take your pick. Are you doing the haircut or the perm? No, I didn't, actually. I said, I'll do the haircut, you do the perm.
Don't break his privilege.
Yeah, and Jeff's hair was longer at the time, so it was long enough for them to do the procedure, to do the roll-up. And so he was a good sport in the whole thing, and he got the perm, and believe me, it was a really tight perm. So they trimmed it substantially afterwards, but he took the brunt of that for months, absolutely months.
Jeff had expertise in instructional design and technology and curriculum development. His bachelor degree was in literature. Starting in 2000, he also held positions as the Ukraine Project Director, Georgia Project Director, and India-U.S. Exchange Director. It seemed that he found his center in global education. Jeff has traveled to India, for example, 22 times since 1995. To know Jeff Armstrong was to know the world, and to know the world through his eyes was to see the shared humanity of every humble being. He traveled the world to share his passion for knowledge, learning, and for the personal growth that results from such undertakings.
Actually, the very first time I got to leave the United States or travel outside of the United States was in 1995, and I was asked if I was interested in going to India, and a fellow that we all worked for, John Blong, he asked just a very general question of about 40 administrators in the room. Does anybody want to go to India? And so when I heard him say that, I thought, that might be interesting. So I was the only one that raised his hand at that time. Now, in the U.S., when someone says they're doing a workshop, of course, they say to you, we say a workshop is you start at 9 o'clock, you finish at 5 o'clock, you take an hour for lunch in there and stuff. And so I'm looking at my watch and I'm seeing that this workshop is going to start at 9 and it's already 8:30. And we're just ordering breakfast, and they're bringing coffee and they're bringing tea, and I'm sitting there. And meanwhile, I'm starting to notice that it's really getting really hot, and a sweat is beginning to pour off me. But I had my overheads, and I knew what I was doing. So, and the next thing I know, I'm standing in a room with about 200 people in it, and they're all sitting in rows, and there's a huge podium and a dais with people sitting there. This is the workshop. And so I sit down in this chair, and I'm starting to get nervous, but I've got my overheads, and I'm ready. I'm ready to go. And so, well, of course, a couple minutes before that, I'd started to look around, and guess what? No overhead projector. Well, I started to mention something to the dean that was there, and he just shook his head. He said, "We don't have one." So I get up there and I proceed to go through, and I'm literally holding these overheads up to see what they say in the light, trying to go through and make what I had thought as a workshop into kind of something that made sense. And so the whole thing was just a disaster, in my opinion. And I finally, about 5 o'clock, I'd gotten to the point where I'd gotten as much information as I could get out, and I was completely soaking wet and completely exhausted and completely confused. Well, just then the principal of the college comes walking in the door, and he was a kind of an unusual looking Indian guy. He was a wrestler, actually. He was a big barrel-chested fellow, short, but he big bony guy and big chest and stuff. And he walks in, and he walks up to us very purposely. And Adrian and I both are about the same size, and we were standing there. And I know we were both sort of shocked by the way he walked in. And he grabbed both of us around us, and he picked us up and he squeezed us. And I thought, oh my gosh, he's going to kill us. He squeezed us, and he steps back and he says to me, "Thank you very much. This was the greatest day in the history of Siddhartha College." The name of the school is Siddhartha College. And I can remember thinking at that moment, oh my gosh, what is going on here? Because I had thought it was the worst day they could have had. He seemed to think it went really well. That was really my first international experience. And I have to say, you know, the next 6 weeks or so were just a fabulous experience. I mean, it was just the most intense learning experience I'd ever had. But that first day, I learned more about working in another culture, thinking on your feet, how to be creative, all those kinds of things in all that one day. And I never would have had that experience had I not raised my hand in that meeting. So that's kind of that's my first experience abroad.
You can't really experience the culture and the people unless you live with them as close as you can. Not in a hotel, but with them. And I always strive to do that. And I think Jeff felt the same way.
And then he always just was looking for other folks to come alongside him to help do the work. And I think that's kind of where I jumped in. It was shortly after I started, maybe a year or two, and they were doing a project in Ukraine. And I went up to him and I just said, "Hey, I'd like to be involved in that project in Ukraine." And his response was, "Great, you're going on the next trip." And then he kind of walked off, and I thought, I'm not sure what I just signed up for, but I'm excited about it, and this is going to be fun. And sure enough, he had the opportunity to go on the next trip to participate in that project and do some extra work and things like that. So that's kind of how you got to know Jeff, and that's kind of how Jeff operated and functioned. Was he wanted people to kind of grab things, run with it.
To know Jeff Armstrong was to know the man who met the Dalai Lama and Mother Teresa in India, traveled the Middle East through the Fulbright Foundation, spent time among the Buddhist ruins in Cambodia, saw the Holy Land through the eyes of a Palestinian friend.
There is a saying in Afghanistan, it's very common in Afghanistan. People say that if you want to become with someone, if you want to become friend with someone, or if you want to know someone better, travel with him or travel with her. So we traveled a lot with Jeff Armstrong.
I remember Jeff, Jeremy, and myself were sitting and working on that project with Al-Quds College in Amman, Jordan.
We had the opportunity on a weekend to cross the King Hussein Bridge in Jordan from Amman into Palestine. That's John's home country.
And as we were walking there, he looked at me and said, "Hey John, what it takes to go and visit Ramallah and Bethlehem?" And I said, "Well, not much, just put a couple things in a small bag because we have to cross the bridge and we can go." And he said, "Oh, let's go." And it came like that. It was like, first of all, I thought it was a joke, but you know, we had great time.
So although we had American passports, John was not able to ride the Israeli bus because he was Palestinian, is Palestinian. And so John, and we had the opportunity to experience that with John, what it was like to be treated essentially by the Israelis like they do to the Palestinians. And because Jeff and I were Americans, we were blue passport carrying folks, when we got to the line to check in to Palestine, Israel, Jeff and I both got interrogated kind of in a back area because they were trying to figure out why we were riding the Palestinian bus and not riding the Israeli.
He gives you that kind of feeling that the travel by itself is a big learning experience. So I felt always that Jeff's mission then was to bring those experiences into the classroom so that we can talk about it with our students, we share it with our students. And yes, Carol Cunningham, I had the honor also to travel with her to Ukraine on one of those trips and work together there with our friends at the university in Drohobych in Ukraine. One of the things that I remember about Jeff is him telling me one day that it's not about me, it's about the work that I do that is very important. So I always felt that Jeff was very genuine about everything that he did.
Jeff worked to dispel apartheid in education in South Africa, worked with the Ministry of Education in Afghanistan, and helped set up learning institutes in areas of the world most yearning for the promises that only an educated population can produce.
My name is Abdul Rashid Altaf. I'm originally from Afghanistan. I met Dr. Jeff Armstrong in Afghanistan back in 2012. In his first few weeks in Afghanistan, he was looking to hire a senior program officer for associate degrees. Dr. Jeff Armstrong was in Afghanistan to pilot 5 community colleges. When he first hired me as a subordinate to help him with the establishment of the community colleges in Afghanistan, I did not know anything about community colleges because it was Jeff that initiated that and established community colleges in Afghanistan, and it was the first community colleges in the history of the country. We worked almost 8 years with Dr. Jeff Armstrong in Afghanistan.
Actually playing golf there this is a tee box, by the way, for those uninitiated to golf in Afghanistan, but I'm playing golf there in Kabul, Afghanistan. This was taken probably in 2012, I would guess. Yeah. And these are some of the people that I used to play golf with. Unfortunately, the security where the golf course is kind of way out of town near what's called the Karga Dam, and our security folks get nervous when you want to travel out there, and then eventually they just stopped us from doing that.
When Mike O'Hara was an English faculty here, and I had Mike as an instructor when I was a student here, Mike and I shared novels all the time. And Mike would always say, "Bob, you're going to like this one." And I did. Well, I do the same with Renee Britt now. Renee and I share books back and forth. But anyway, I knew Jeff liked to read, and so one day I said to him, "Hey, we could share some books back and forth, right? I'll find some I think you'll like, and if you don't, that's okay. There's no book that's bad to read." And he said, "I don't think so, Bob." He said, "You just read cheap, trashy fiction." So actually, we never actually shared a book, but we would talk about books a lot and what we had read. And I like history and international affairs and stuff. So his affinity for international ed and my interest in what's going on in the world made for some good conversations. So I always enjoyed that.
To know Jeff Armstrong was to know a man of amazing stories. Whether living in a caravan in California, sleeping in jungles with a tiger nearby, canoeing the boundary waters swarmed with mosquitoes, being escorted by a machine gun in South America, rescuing Dave Chappelle from a racist hotel keep at 3 a.m. in D.C., Jeff was a man who lived a full life.
The first experience that I had with Jeff internationally was to go to India in 1996. We were starting a community college, and at that time it was called Madras. Now it's called Chennai. And they have excellent higher education opportunities, and elementary and lower grades, but community college, middle education there wasn't much opportunity. So we thought, well, a good way to fill that gap was to start a community college. Jeff and I had some very unique experiences. We stayed at a Catholic monastery somewhere between Chennai and Madras, and we stayed in a grass hut, and lizards were crawling up and down the wall, and the bathroom was a hole in the ground in the next room. And I mentioned in the middle of the night to Jeff, after our water bottles fell over in the middle of the night, it was dark, and I said, "Should we turn on a light and see what that was?" And he said, "Marshall, I don't think we want to know." I said, "You're probably right." And so in '99, he sent me an email and he said that they need to learn marketing and sales, and there's a company in Moscow that has requested a marketing instructor to go and put together marketing curriculum. Jeff would not have asked just anybody to do that. And I really am so grateful that Jeff had enough confidence that he would allow me to do that.
To know Jeff Armstrong was to know a man with a very kind heart, who adored his family, cared greatly for his students, his peers, and respected deeply the faiths and cultures of the world. He was creative with a love of art and music, writing and reading, and passed that love down to his children.
I remember he was very supportive of, again, the study abroad, where we took students to Jordan 3 years in a row. And it came as, I would say, a negotiation part of Jeff with the dean of the college in Amman, Jordan, that we are working on establishing this business program for that college, but how can we also get students to become part of that program too, and part of the exchange programs?
Then we had another grant, and Jeff asked if I would be a part of sending, this time not just faculty, but students, agriculture students, to Denmark. And each individual person, including faculty, stayed with another farm family. And we worked there. And our students were able to learn mainly agricultural sustainability. And all the students got to see all of that.
His strong interest in international education, especially with the Stanley Center for Peace and Security and sister cities and all the companies that do business internationally, that I thought enriched the college, that worldview enriched the college. And that, to me, was doing a great part to Jeff.
In my life, Jeff, I think, and I told him this, he would always show up at the right time. I mean, certain things that happened to me, anything that I do with music now, I can trace right back to Jeff's apartment in San Francisco. I moved to Rhode Island in 1982. And the reason I moved here is because Jeff was here. He was going to school at the University of Rhode Island. So I said, Jeff, I'd like to come out to the East Coast. I hadn't really ever been out here. And I said, I only have $500. He said, that's fine. Come on out. And so he was, there's been these crucial moments that he's been there, at the right time. I'm a musician, and I've had projects with people where I'll make arrangements and then send it to them and see if they can kind of figure out some lyrics for them or something. So when I can't. And so I started the process like that.
I was waiting for hope. Can you see me? I was waiting for answers. Can you hear me? I was walking with my mom to the daily mass. On blue coats and sips of sacrificial wine, I was working for answers.
One day I got just a week or so into our Zooming, I got a little poem from him that he had written at Effigy Mounds. His family had gone there to see the mounds. And he told me, he said, I didn't have the strength to climb up to the top, so I just stayed in the car and I wrote this little poem, and that's became the song Effigy Mounds. And then over the next 3 months, he would send me little poems, little stories about his life, and I would turn them into songs. And we wrote 7 or 8 songs together. And he lived long enough to see it get published. But it was really interesting, fun, meaningful thing to do.
I was talking to a friend the other night. He didn't have long to live. Asked him when he knew it was time. And this is what he said. Well, I went to a spiritual place today. is near and the stars that are falling. The stars are falling, filling the boat. Time to roll for the shore. Time to roll for the shore.
Yeah, I think when I think back about what legacy has Jeff Armstrong left at Muscatine Community College and Eastern Iowa Community Colleges, I think the entrepreneurial mindset that he brought to every situation where he was just going to try to figure it out.
So yeah, I mean, he always gave me that impression that it doesn't matter where you put him, he becomes like part of that, that community and act like one. And that's, I think, that's an excellent characteristic of an individual that can adapt to change very quick.
He just got it done, and you were either going to be along for the ride or he was just going to keep moving without you. And so I feel honored to be able to follow in his footsteps.
I would ask him, like, so how did you become a college president? And he goes, I have no idea. He said, they just kept promoting me. He said, the only thing I can point to is I know a good idea when I see one, and I empower people to do them.
One key talent that he had is he recognized strengths in folks. He encouraged those strengths, and he sort of helped them clear the brush and grow within those strengths.
Yeah, I don't remember how soon it was in my career, but it was pretty early, maybe year 3, 4, or 5, somewhere in there. And he came to me one day and he goes, so what are you going to do when you don't want to teach anymore? And he goes, I think you have the potential to do more than just be in the classroom. You're good at being in the classroom, but there's other things that I think may interest you. Would you consider, some of those other projects and some of those other things? And I know, like I said, I'm the Dean of Instruction at Muscatine Community College. I would not be sitting in that seat without Jeff kind of pushing me and encouraging me and challenging me to do more.
So my life was enriched because of the opportunities that Jeff Armstrong gave me. I miss him a lot, and I wish he was still with us and I could still travel with him. We had fantastic experiences.
And I told Jeff that, I want to get a small tattoo. He said no. I said, I like it, and I want like a very small one. It's going to be like under my sleeve. He was like, we spent many time together, and he was like my mentor, and he had tried to say that. And when I insisted that I'm going to have one, he said, no, that's end of the chapter, no. And I'm saying this to you because I mean like your dad. And I said, okay. And I will never forget that.
Some of the old guard around here, now that I'm in my position, I look at it as Jeff's position because that's the position he held when I was here. I've heard a few folks say, well, you were raised by Jeff Armstrong, and I'll take that as a compliment because what that meant was he was a person of action. He was going to figure out, it was going to be creative, and it was going to be well done, and he was going to have others around him that were kind of rowing in the same direction.
Time to roll for the shore. Time to roll for the shore. Time to roll for the